Hi everybody, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface. So in this video today, I'm actually going to be dealing with two different types of World of Warcraft information which came to us yesterday. Last night, an interview broke on VentureBeat.com. I'm going to post the link in the description down below, so feel free to see the whole thing in its entirety. It's about 4 pages long. I'm not going to go through every question. I'm going to go through certain questions. Where lead game designer for World of Warcraft Ion Hazzikostas was being interviewed, so there is the potential there for some very interesting exchanges. I'm then going to also deal with the question, people want my opinion on the BanHammer. The BanHammer which dropped yesterday, which banned a substantial amount of accounts. Stay tuned towards the end of the video for that. What I will say though is my point of view is going to be very short and very succinct as regards to that. There's going to be no real rambling about that whatsoever. So firstly, I'm going to focus on this interview by VentureBeat with Ion Hazzikostas. Now, as mentioned, because they were about 4 pages long, lots of questions were asked. Some of them I would deem as just, kind of generic questions where Ion can say what he wants to say and kind of promote aspects of Warlords of Draenor, etc. But with big credit to VentureBeat, I've got to give them props. Some of the questions which they asked were questions which I would certainly want answers to as a customer. As a customer who feels very sort of let down at the minute by aspects of Warlords of Draenor, they did step up to the plate. Whether or not Ion answers them in a way that will satisfy us, completely different kettle of fish. So the first question which I'm going to focus on was the third one that was asked, and they say, has anything about the content in the Warlords expansion disappointed you? Wow, that's a big question, and obviously could lead to multiple things. Now, the answer that Ion gave, before I give my kind of spin on it, is there are areas we've seen slight declines in. Ion, sweetheart, you've just lost near to 3 million subscribers. The best part of a third of your customer base. I would describe it a little bit more than slight declines, but never mind. But he attributes those failures to the World of Warcraft team for not keeping players properly incentivized and interesting. So it's a very generic answer. He's not going into specifics, what I mean by that, but he's absolutely right. Ion Hazzikostas is absolutely spot on. The failures are down to the WoW team. They're not down to us, because the World of Warcraft subscribers came back in their millions to play Warlords of Draenor. They really did. And, it clearly showed that the interest in WoW is still there. To me, it showed that the storyline, with the whole reinvention of Draenor before it was destroyed, was intriguing enough to bring people back. I was intrigued, as a lover of the Burning Crusade, to see Outland in its entirety before the destruction. I would have preferred it to be properly back in time as opposed to an alternative timeline. I think alternative timelines, to me, actually separate me a wee bit, because it doesn't matter what happens. It's not our timeline. Does it really care? All the people that we interact with, whether it be the Prophet Velen or Gul'dan or Grommash, they're not ours. They're not our versions of them. They're the alternative timeline. So I kind of sometimes find it difficult to give to shysters. You know what I mean? But yes, it absolutely was the World of Warcraft team's fault. But he does go into one specific, which is dungeons. Saying that we made a bunch of dungeons. Ion, I'm going to have to correct you again, fella. Sweetie pie. Gonna have to correct you again. You didn't make a bunch of dungeons at all. You made 7 and a rehash dungeon. The lowest number of dungeons you've ever created for an expansion to date, and you've had 5 expansions. So you've had quite a few expansions. There weren't a bunch of dungeons. There were a couple. There were a few. Not many. A handful. We'll meet halfway and say a handful of dungeons. But he does go into the fact that they were, what I mentioned in a video very recently, that they were literally out of date within a couple of weeks. Because you were going, these dungeons of course are created at for people just hitting top level, for level 100s. So people are going in there with some blues and most likely some greens equipped. And then the gear that they get from that dungeon, they're using to advance into the heroic version of the dungeon. But as soon as LFR and raiding comes out, they've pretty much become obsolete. So there really is no incentive to rerun them again. There's really no incentive to do them again. And sticking a daily quest saying, hey, if you go and do Shadowing Burial Grounds now, we'll give you 175 garrison resources to complete it. To me, that's not an incentive. That's a, nah, don't give a shit. So, yeah, he did go into one specific Witcher's Dungeons. I would have preferred him to go into more specifics. But, you know, we get what we can take. Fairness, he did say it's our fault, and it is. Now, the second question that I want to focus on is about garrisons, which is very close to a lot of our hearts. Now, the question was, have the player-created garrison towns in Warlords, which offer missions for followers you recruit in-game, changed the amount of time people log in? Players joke about playing World of Garrison Craft. Now, I think that phrasing from VentureBeat is very clever, because it is actually quite a big issue, this whole Farmville tag label which has been placed upon garrisons. So I think it's a very diplomatic way of phrasing that question to make it sound kind of cheery, you know, hey, we're joking about World of Garrison Craft, but at the same time has a very important message. So again, VentureBeat, I've got to give you, you know, thumbs up for the line of questioning which you've you know, gone down with a couple of these points. So how does Ian address this issue? Well, I found his answer a little bit bizarre and very interesting indeed, because he said, we've now seen some very deliberate short spurts in logging on with the World of Warcraft. So people who might have a little bit of time free, 5-10 minutes maybe before they go to work or school or wherever, would log into WoW, would go to their garrison command table, get all the rewards that they got from sending their followers out, and then re-send out other followers to different missions, and then log out of the game. And he said whether or not that has actually had any impact or come at the expense of the social element to the game, you know, logging on to do a battleground, logging on to do PvP, logging on to do questing with friends, etc. He says, I do not know, you know. Who knows? But first of all, if you have an MMORPG and your audience is only logging on in very short spurts to play a Facebook Farmville-esque type experience, then I would, if I was a designer, I would look at that and say, I've failed. I have failed to engage my audience, because all they feel they have to do, or all they are interested in doing, is simply logging on to this mini game, so to speak, and they're not staying for more what we'd class as engaging content with an MMORPG. The questing aspect of it, the dungeoning aspect of it, the PvP element of it, etc, etc. And we joke about it, but there's a sad element that the joke that we say about garrisons is just very depressingly true, that we often find we log into the World of Warcraft and after 10 minutes or so we're like, wait a minute, all I've done is just ride around my garrison, I've done nothing, because there is no incentive to get out into the world. To me, there's absolutely zilch. Do I want to go out and do a Pexis Crystal dailies? No, I'd rather stick a red hot poker at my ass. Do I want to go out and grind every single Emperor Shao Hao esque reputation in the faction in this expansion? No, I can't think of anything worse than just turning up to Shattrath and then killing a few mobs and getting terribly low numbers of experience and thinking, oh great, and I've got to do it for this, and then I've got to do it for that rep, and I've got to do it for that rep, and it's just like, no thank you, thanks but no thanks. Do I want to do dungeons? We've already gone through that. No, they're irrelevant. There's no reason to run them. There's no reward to run them. It's not as if some of the bosses could potentially drop a mount or two. And now we've got 12 odd mounts on the Blizz store. That is really beginning to add up, and it's beginning to grate, I think, quite a few people. Hence my parody video yesterday, and hence the response that my comment has actually had on the official World of Warcraft Mythic Runesaber release vid. So yes, we're having elements of content taken away, and a lot of us are finding that if we are logging into the game, we're simply logging into exchange follower missions and then run around the garrison. So to just kind of sum up, if I was seeing very short spurts of logging in and logging off and it was clearly designed around the garrison table, I would feel as a developer as if I'd failed. So did Ian answer that question satisfactorily? I don't think so. I think he gave a very odd answer to it that definitely could have done with a few more layers on top. The next question I want to address is, to what do you attribute the post-expansion drop in World of Warcraft subscribers? Big news, of course, with the near 3 million subscribers lost at the end of Q1 2015. Ian's answer is pretty much that World of Warcraft is not a year-round game anymore. People will log into the World of Warcraft, play the content, leave for months on end, wait for content to accumulate, and then come back. Now, to some degree, he is correct. To another degree, there is simply not enough content for people to do. Now, we talk about that, and game developers said, look, it doesn't matter how much content we ever put in a game, it will never be enough for some people. They're absolutely correct when they say that. But we just have to look at the endgame content for Warlords of Draenor, and it's plain to see there is little to nothing for people to do. And what there is there for people to do is simply not engaging. I don't have to repeat myself about the reputation grinds and the Apexis Crystal dailies and the out-of-date dungeons. When you have it set up in that manner and the content isn't engaging, people will leave. It is as simple as that. People will leave. So I will actually go one further than that, Ian, and say, yes, you are partly correct, but there is a huge aspect in the fact that the content which you've produced, your team have produced, your guys have produced for them. I'm talking the whole of the World of Warcraft team here, not just his raid people. But the content which the World of Warcraft devs have produced is simply not anywhere near enough. It's definitely not engaging, and it's definitely not interesting. And it's sad to see that we haven't had the development, especially with the storyline and the Warlords. I feel as if I don't know really anything about the Warlords at all. I've not really latched onto any of them apart from Gul'dan. Gul'dan's the most fleshed out character in the whole expansion by a country mile. And then after that, it's probably Khadgar. Other Warlord wise, meh. You know, there could be Donna and Blitzen and Dopey and Sleepy from the freaking dwarfs, you know what I mean? Snowbite and dwarfs. They are that irrelevant. They're just a number. So yeah, I think definite lack of development of storyline, lack of engaging and interesting content has been a very big contributing factor to the huge drop off of subs. Not small drop off, not medium drop off, huge drop off in subscribers. Now we get on to the reason why Ian most likely did the interview, because he gets to really talk about patch 6.2, and I'm going to merge together the next two questions into one, because firstly, GamesBeat, part of VentureBeat of course, ask, what features of patch 6.2 do you hope will improve the player experience? And then the very next question is there new content in the patch, which is, of course, just setting up Ion Hazzikostas to let rip. And surprisingly enough, these two questions, Ian gives his most fullest of attention and answers-wise. So we'll just address the first point. Which 6.2 content do you hope will bring or enhance the player experience? And he talks about Mythic Dungeons and Time Walker Dungeons. Oh dear. Ian, you're setting yourself up massively for failure if you think that, because the Time Walker dungeons that we've already seen are absolute drivel. They really are. They're face walk nonsense. You don't need to even half switch on. I had some people, well, not some people. I had one person saying, "Oh, as his keyboard turning when he was doing the Time Walker dungeon." And then somebody was saying, yeah, he's probably just bored out of his head. And I've got to be honest with you, when I was doing that Time Walker dungeon, if I played the audio, the true audio of the dungeon, you'd hear Judge Judy. I was watching Judge Judy while going through the dungeon. I had one hand on my keys, and then the other hand, you know, sort of semi on my mouse with my buttons on the side, which just press every now and again. And then I was paying more attention to what was going on. And that is how boring it was. And the nostalgic element he talks about, he also talks about hoping that people relive old memories. As I also mentioned, to me, it kind of harms and impacts those memories. Because it isn't like, oh, great, I'm back in the Nexus again. Or, oh, great, I'm back in Alcatraz again. There is that initial thought when you first load into the dungeon. You're just like, ah, yeah. And then by the time you've got to the end of it, you're just like, what have you done? What have you done to my beautiful dungeon? And so there's no sort of nostalgic element to it. It's more of a sense of fear. It's more of a sense of dread. Oh my dear Lord. Those dungeons which I used to love back in the day. And now you've tainted my experience with this monstrosity. Yeah, Time Walker dungeons, not great. Mythic dungeons, well, a trick's been massively missed with Mythic dungeons. And something which is really bizarre, because Ian completely and hypocritically contradicts the content in the World of Warcraft. Because he talks about how important dungeons are in an MMO. And even quotes as saying they're the greatest strength of an MMO. And yet dungeons in the World of Warcraft are being decimated by poxy content like LFR, which has literally ripped the heart and soul out of dungeoneering. And the way that they've been made so easy now, and they are so easy, even the heroic versions of them, that they really don't hold too much of a place. There's no legitimate challenge. So that's where you hoped Mythic dungeons would come in. And when I think about Mythic dungeons, I think about dungeons which may in first glance, or at least at first glance, look like the original dungeon, whatever it may be. Again, let's just use Shadowmoon Burial Ground as an example. But if you've done it on normal and heroic, a mythic version isn't just a slightly harder version with more HPs and more damage, which is pretty much being right now at the minute. To me, it could even be a different way to tackle the dungeon, a different direction. The dungeon now goes off into another area, and there are fresh bosses that have very specific skills and abilities set up for mythic people who are going to attempt them. I don't believe that you can just tweak HPs and damage and say, hey folks, we've got mythic. I don't think that's going to work at all. It's just going to be a slightly harder dungeon, but we've already seen on the PTR so far that they've been 4-manned without any real difficulty whatsoever. So if he's kind of holding that there be integral pieces of content, I think he's in for a bit of a surprise. I don't think the community is going to warm up to them the way that you think. And then when he talks about is there new content in patch 6.2, well of course there is new content, and he says it's one of the largest content patches that we've released. And on paper you might say yes, you're actually right, Ian. On paper it does look like this is one of the largest patches that you released. But when we've just gone into the Time Walker and the Mythic, I don't think they're going to be particularly engaging. The shipyard is going to be very short-lived fun, I believe. People are going to love it to start with because it's a new aesthetic and they actually get to create ships and send them out on the mission. But people are not stupid. And, you know, they're really not. And I don't understand why Blizzard really think we're dumb. People are not stupid. They're going to realise very, very quickly indeed that shipyards are just Command Table 2.0. You don't physically get involved with your shipyard. You don't get on the ships and go out and do cool missions with your followers. No, you stand at a command table just like you would in your garrison right now, and you drag ships, which could just be followers, into a slot just like you do with the command table, and then you press fuck off. And then they go and do a mission, and then you sit back and you wait. And the funny thing about the shipyard is as well, is they are out for longer periods of time, or they could be out for longer periods of time. There are some missions which take multiple days, 3 days or so. But the reward would be terrible. So you'd say, right, the reward for going out for a 3-day mission is 100 gold. And you're just like, wait a minute, I've got a mission on my command table right now in my garrison offering me 250 gold, and that's going to be back in 4 hours. It's really, really weird indeed. So I think the novelty of the shipyard is going to wear off pretty quickly. Give it a few weeks. I'm not saying immediately. I think people could get into it. And I do think there's a couple of nice little achievements to get, like the sailor's hat and all that kind of jazz. But I think as longevity, goodness gracious, no. I think a lot of people are going to cotton on very quickly exactly what it is. Command Table 2.0. And as for Tanaan Jungle, yes, we've got the raid, but after a very short quest line going into Tanaan, it simply turns into zones that are fragmented or segmented, either to be perfectly honest with you, into Apexis Crystal Daily areas. And we are already sick and pissing tired of Apexis Crystal Dailies. We didn't gravitate to them in 6.0. In 6.1, you thought we needed to do more of them, which we can't be bothered to do. And in 6.2, the whole bulk of Tanaan Jungle actually revolves around the collection and grinding of Apexis crystals. Oi, oi, oi. So, on paper, there is content there. Is it engaging and interesting content? Dear Lordy, a lot of it, I think people are going to be so bored with very quickly. The only thing which I've semi-enjoyed on the PTR so far, and I'm not talking about the raid, because I'm sure the raid's going to be great. I've done a few bosses. They have been fun. Ian's team, and Ian actually deals with the raid, so he can only kind of talk at it from that point of view, really. His raid team normally do a great job, and I think that's going to be oodles of fun. But the only thing I've pretty much enjoyed is just going around farming rares to see if I could get the baleful gear, because you can buy, surprise, surprise, an item with 20,000 Apexis crystals that will change a 650 blue, which you get from the rares, into a 695 epic. So it's going to be a very easy way, if you've got alts, of getting some substantial rewards. But as a main character, I could do with a couple of pieces here or there, maybe a ring, some bracers, but otherwise, not really. So, content-wise, is there some? On paper, yes. Engaging and interesting content. Only you can make your own mind about that when you play it. But from somebody who's seen it firsthand, I am very worried about the longevity of 6.2. I do not think there's anything remotely engaging enough to hold us. If Mythic Dungeons were specific and they'd actually created new dungeons to launch this Mythic, because Mythic Dungeons to me is a big deal, could be a really big deal, and if they actually created specific dungeons to go round the whole of Hellfire Citadel, maybe 3 dungeons, and had the Mythic difficulty on them, that could have been brilliant, Blizz. But you've missed a trick. You've missed a trick, and I think you've taken the easy route, the easy, boring, let's just get him grinding route. And I don't think it's anywhere near as fun as Timeless Isle, and I don't think it's going to hold people's attention for too long whatsoever. So they're the questions which I personally wanted to focus on in this video, because to me, they were more orientated around of what's happened to Warlords of Draenor so far. What do the devs see for Warlords of Draenor in the future? So no, I think they're best selected. He does talk about other things, raiding in particular, because of course raiding is his baby, and the way that Mythic raiding has impacted guilds and stuff, and he talks about the social element of the World of Warcraft. And there's definitely some of the things in here which I agree with. The community, I don't think, has taken the video, or the interview, I should say, too much to heart. I think he's had quite a vocal reaction about this as well. I'm probably saying some of the nicest things about it, to be perfectly honest with you. He did recently tweet out that just because he didn't mention a lot of the concerns of the game doesn't mean that the team aren't looking into them. But I think the fact that he chose to answer so many questions in such a very generic way, I can understand why people would think that. So, I'm going to move on now to the second piece. This isn't going to take too long, I promise you. Which is about the BanHammer dropping from Blizzard yesterday, banning approximately, or at least over, 100,000 World of Warcraft accounts for 6 months. Not permabans, and this is for the use of botting programs. Now, a lot of people are saying this is most likely in retaliation for Blizzard losing a court case against, I think it's Bossland, who produce third-party bot software. And they actually lost a court case recently because of that. 7th of May, something like that. 6th, 7th of May, about a week or so ago, put it that way. And a lot of people think it's retaliation for that. They're identifying the program and they've now smashed down the BanHammer. What's been quite interesting from the people who've been banned is a lot of them have actually come out and said, yeah, I've been hit with the ban. I've been botting since Wrath of the Lich King. Without, never received a ban until now. And it's amazing how many of them have actually come out and said similar things. Do we take them at the word? Well, they've really got no reason to lie about it, have they? It just shows how little actual repercussion has happened because of botting. What's my own thought on it? Tough fucking shit. You cheat, you get banned. Now, I know a lot of people go, yeah, but the game's so fucking boring. I don't want to go fishing for this and fishing for that and fishing for the other. Or I don't want to, go into a PvP battleground and work for my honor points and all that. I couldn't give a fuck. I couldn't give a shit. If you use third-party software to enhance your game experience, normally it's at the detriment to others. And I find bots in Battlegrounds one of the top reasons why I don't PvP anymore. We've got balance and all that kind of jazz to go around it. But one of the things I hate is going into a PvP Battleground and just seeing a bunch of bots. Pisses me off, doesn't make me want to PvP. So the more people like that are out of the game, as far as I'm concerned, the better. Zero, zip, nada sympathy for you whatsoever. I don't care how boring you think stuff is, how grindy you think stuff is, and we all have issues with the game. Doesn't mean resorting to cheating is the way to do it. So if you are somebody that's got banned and you're looking for me to be your vocal spokesperson, you are barking up the wrong fucking tree, me laddies, or me laddiesses, because I have no sympathy for you whatsoever. You got what you deserved. I think Blizzard actually just chickened out with a permaban, and they just gave you a 6-month ban so you can be ready for the next expansion with your new bots. So you can be ready for the next expansion. They should have done a permaban, to be perfectly honest with you, and really put their foot down, but that's what you get. That's what you get. It is what it is. And tough shit. So there we go. Be very interesting to see your thoughts and feelings about the interview. If you've read the full interview, again, I'm going to link it in the description down below. If you've read the interview, let me know what your thoughts and feelings were. Were you buoyed by it? Were you depressed by it? Did you think it was a nothing interview? Every thought and feeling about it whatsoever, I'd like to hear in the comments down below. And the botting issue, were you pro it or against it? I don't care. Post in the comments. I'd be very intrigued to see, if you do have a contrary point to mine on the bans which handed out, why? Why, what's your argument? Be interesting to see. So please, again, in the comments down below. But most importantly, I hope you enjoyed the vid, which went on a lot longer than I hoped. Please do like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to give it old school. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and also twitch.tv/HeelvsBabyface for live streaming. Wow, I haven't done that in absolutely ages. Done it out proper like that, innit? And I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care, everybody. Bye-bye.